Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Before I bring Eva up to the stage, I want to tell everyone how much of a treat we're in for. Eva is a serial entrepreneur and founder. Currently, she is a general partner at Susa Ventures. Previously, she was a founding executive at a company called Factual. Before that, she was the head of marketing at Applied Semantics, and then actually between Applied Semantics and Factual, let me correct myself, she was senior product marketing manager at Google and YouTube. So she has quite a track record from being an entrepreneur and now investing and advising in startups. And so what we do at Startup Grind, a tradition here, because our speakers are taking their time out of their day to talk to us, to teach us things, to answer questions. We don't pay these people, they're here to help. So on the count of three, I want everyone to get out of their seats and get as loud as you can and welcome Eva Ho to the stage. 1, 2, 3. Good. All right, here we are.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Thank you for being here. I'm very excited. So how we normally start these is just kind of learning a little bit about you. So tell us about your background. Where did you grow up?
Thanks for the question. By the way, everyone, thanks for coming tonight. And I hope it's a $12 well spent. And for my friends who know me, they'll probably have heard some of my stories before, so I apologize in advance for being repetitive. But I've actually gotten to know Joe over the last couple of months, and this is a young man to admire, so I just wanted to say you should get to know Joe just as much as you're here to know me. So I was born in China. I grew up in Mozambique, Africa, and my family left during the Civil War in the late 70s, and we were refugees actually to the United States. So we were very lucky that we immigrated to Boston in the early 80s, but we came here with nothing, literally nothing, and we were on food stamps for a couple years, and then we lived in the housing projects most of my life until I went to college and through college. So that's how I sort of got started.
So what did your parents do when you were in Boston?
So we ran a small restaurant. So my parents in Africa, my dad has a story that probably a novel could be written on, but they weren't fancy people. We weren't diplomats or anything like that. He was a farmer. And so when we came to the U.S., we didn't have any skills. They don't speak any English. Even today, they don't speak any English. But the only thing we could do to get out of food stamps was to start a tiny restaurant near Fenway Park. And it had 30 seats, and we did $200, $300 a day, and that supported a family of 6, basically.
And so what did you learn being involved in a small business at such a young age?
Yeah, so I think, looking back, a lot of folks ask sort of what experiences in my life have been most seminal and most helpful in terms of later on being an entrepreneur, as well as how I think about what entrepreneurs to choose to fund today. As a kid, I think I had a very unusual childhood. I worked 30, 40 hours a week since I was 11 years old. But I was a grumpy kid because I was like, all these kids got out to play and all that, and I had to work, as well as my siblings. But those sort of that experience specifically had taught me a lot, because at 11 I was actually the accountant for my restaurant, because my parents again spoke no English, and the tax accountant came one day and we were like, what is this stuff about taxes? And I'm short and I was like, yay big, but I did all the bills, and we sat there, we added up all the little checks, and the guy actually felt really bad. He was just kind of like, whatever I just gave him all I didn't know what the hell to do, but I was 11 years old, and looking back at that moment and many moments later on, I managed the restaurant, the suppliers, customers, and all this stuff, and I think it taught me sort of the ethic of hard work, persistence, and really just driving through and surviving. And I think it's sort of the adversity that has sort of helped me today to get through a lot of stuff today. And so when I meet entrepreneurs who have interesting journeys or stories, that really resonates with me.
So being an 11-year-old doing the accounting, and obviously your peers didn't have that same lifestyle, what was that like? How long did it take you to realize that it was an opportunity or something that just had to be done, and not, compare yourself to other people, but realize that you were different?
It took a long time, honestly. I think various people blossom at different times in their life. I think some folks blossom when they're a teenager, college, whatnot. It took me forever. I can say I didn't really kind of come into my own until I was probably in my 30s. And I think a lot of it was just not knowing if I fit, if I belonged. And even through, I went to a good college, but during college we had other sort of terrible things happen to my family. And then post-college. So it's funny because as a child, I was never taught to dream. I had no time for daydreaming. So, you had a question that you had put in the email that said, like, what did you want to be when you grew up? I never stopped to think about that. I didn't dream of being a baseball player or a dancer or whatever. Like, we had no time for that. And my parents never taught me the skill to dream. They were like, survive, go to school, and go become a doctor if you can, at best you can. So I took some of those sort of aspirational things later into my life, and that's why I travel a lot now. I explore the world a lot. I'm kind of a big adventurer, and I think that's it took me a long time, basically, to get here.
Well, when you're 11 years old and you're doing accounting, you're probably already grown up, right? It's like,
yeah.
you're already
fast.
You're already there, so what else is there to think about? So you're in Boston. Talk us through your transition into college. Where'd you go to school?
I was very lucky to go to Harvard. I went to a public school. Again, none of it was premeditated. It wasn't like my parents like, you have to go to this school, you should go to school. None of that. But I was, had a measure of luck. I had some really great folks, teachers really along the way that said, hey, this girl is really shy, painfully shy, but there might be something about her that's unique. And they kept sort of putting me into interesting classes. And so I got to go to Harvard and on a full scholarship, probably more in need versus merit. And had a decent 4 years there, but I was thinking the other day, I was talking to my siblings, like when I got into Harvard, I was actually really sad. It was actually one of the days I cried, and it's because my brother had gone there, and I would visit him, and I just looked around. I was like, oh my God, all these people, they're like so the experiences, they traveled, and his roommates like intimidated me, and I thought to myself, I don't want to be here. So when I was applying for school, like we applied for like 10 schools, and I really wanted to go to Wellesley, which is a small school, it's all women. I got into Wellesley, and I was psyched. I was like, I got in, this is where I'm going to go. 2 days later, I got the acceptance at Harvard. I was at home, and my parents had come home. I was sitting there, and they're like, oh my God, like, what is that package? I was like, oh, I got in Harvard. And they're like, awesome. And I just started crying because I knew at that point I didn't have a choice, because my parents were going to make me go. I know this sounds so weird. It sounds very much like a first world problem, but I was actually one of the saddest days of my life because I never had a choice. And then I went there, and then during that time, the restaurant burned down. My parents became unemployed. So even during that time, I never really got to take advantage of the school. In some ways, I was slightly resentful for being there, and again, still feeling I didn't fit in. So I didn't take full advantage of what it all had to offer. Looking back now, obviously, I'm really grateful I went, and I made some really great friends, but it's not your typical experience, I would say. So.
And what did you major in there?
I studied biology and visual arts.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So why that route? Was there a specific reason?
It was the aspirational parent-doctor thing.
Yeah.
The visual arts was sort of my side thing to be like, screw you, I'm going to do something completely random. Now as I'm older, like I do photography, and it was actually those classes in visual arts, specifically Professor Chris Killip, that inspired me to today. I have a big passion for arts and photography, and it's really due to him.
So after getting your MBA, did you have kind of a clear idea that you were putting the doctor track aside and you were going into business?
I think it no longer became sort of a feasible track for a lot of reasons, like med schools. You don't get scholarships for med school. So I went to during business school, like I had one company I wanted to work for. I was lucky enough to get into that one company. I didn't have to job hunt. It was in healthcare, awesome company. And then I got to, through that, like I was kind of sort of migrating west. And so much of my goal back then was to get my family out of that. We lived in East Boston, and was to really get them out of that situation. I had to think about, like, where do I buy them a home? And my dad had asthma, so I kept thinking if we went west, the climate would be better, and our family, we just have 6 of us, and we moved as a pod. So I kind of thoughtfully sort of went west, and I came to San Francisco for a couple of years. Then I landed in LA, and my family lives in LA now. So.
Okay, so let's talk about the first big job that you had.
Yep.
What was that?
I think all jobs are big. It's not in the sense that I don't like to think about, even though I felt that way during back that time. I think for now, like people ask me, like, what job should I have before I start a company? Like, how do I best equip myself? And I think it doesn't matter that much, but it's really the choices that you make, whether it's an internship for 3 months or a year or 2, just be the best you can be at that, and do your best to enjoy it and learn from it. I know that's kind of trite, but all those experiences added up. So all my jobs have been big for a variety of reasons, even if I didn't think of it that way while I was in it. But my first big one in tech was Applied Semantics. I was at stamps.com for about 9 months. That was tech. It was like e-postage thing. I was on the strategy team, and we took it public, and it was during a time where it went to $211 and went to $11 all in one day.
Oh, wow.
So unless you've gone through a couple of cycles, it's really hard going there. But while that was happening, I met these 2 wonderful people from Caltech, Gil and Adam, and they were building this little search engine here, and we met, and they wanted a marketing person. I didn't know anything about search technology, and they knew nothing about marketing. Anyways, we bonded, we spoke, and I remember the conversation so clearly. We talked about running. Like, they like running, I like running, and that was where we connected. They were like, Eva, we don't know anything about marketing. I was like, I know nothing about tech, but we took a chance on each other. And that company turned into Applied Semantics, which created AdSense, which we sold for about $1 billion in 2003. So
to Google.
So it was a really fun ride with a small team, a team of 50, and it became sort of the foundation for Google Southern California, which now is a few thousand people strong. So.
What was the initial mission of Applied Semantics, and how did that evolve over time leading up to the acquisition?
Yeah, so I think in retrospect, people think when you start a company, you have this big vision, and you like kind of just go against that vision, and you kind of hit chapters and milestones. It's not like that at all. I mean, we had this wacky meaning-based search engine that nobody used. It was during a time when there were a lot of other search engines. We would watch our traffic, and it was like, 10,000 people a month, or some wacky, like really tiny growth. And then on the board, we had, 100 other opportunities we could pursue using that platforming technology, which was a large ontology, a large database. And it was a matrix with all these ideas. And we would debate all this stuff all the time. But somewhere along the line, we decided to choose 1 or 2. And a lot of small companies, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are facing this, there's endless ideas that you can do. And we saved that matrix, actually. Gil and I laugh about it now. But it was a battle, because different people in the company wanted different. They're like, why don't we pursue this? Why don't we pursue enterprise? Why don't we pursue consumer? Why don't we do? And all of them were possible, but only a few could actually happen. So we ended up with like 3 products, and AdSense happened to be one of them, and it was very timely that it was something that filled the gap. And back then there was no online advertising, and so it's wonderful to see now all these web pages have our little product on it.
That's amazing. So that was pre-IPO at Google, right?
Correct. Yep.
So walk us through what it was like to hear that you were going to be acquired by Google.
Yeah. It happened very fast. We weren't up for sale. We weren't talking to a lot of people. At the same time, we didn't have a lot of money, so we didn't raise a lot of money. We were a cheap penny pinching company that was kind of just surviving. Google approached us, and the deal was done like in a month. And I think what happened was really Gil and Sergey, I believe, had a relationship in the past from their like Silicon Valley days, and we really filled a hole. And we had a competitive bid from another company that was really threatening to Google, and it just went really fast. And I think it was one of those things. They made a good offer, but it was morally a stock offer, so we had to believe that this company that we're selling to was actually going to work. And we're all very young, so we didn't know what. Gil comes from a very modest family too, so none of us came from like financier families and had any idea what all this actually meant. But it happened quickly, and it was like from seeing the paperwork, putting together the deck. I remember putting together literally the deck that night on a table, like with 50 slides, and 2 weeks later we were done.
Wow.
And a week later we were at like the tech talk, and I think Larry and Sergey, they like to move quickly.
Yeah.
So it's fun.
So then how long was that gap between when you got acquired and when you started actually working there at Google?
Immediately. So we were subsumed, and I think we were lucky that they allowed us to stay in LA. I think there was a lot of talk that we had to move up north, and Gil and the team in general believe that there's a lot of talent here, and that we should invest because we have USC, we have Harvey Mudd, we have Caltech, UCLA, that there was enough technical talent for us to thrive here. And that was a big bet 10 years ago, more than 10 years now, 12 years ago. And it was the right bet. So I think LA's really has come a long way, and I'm just privileged to have been part of sort of the beginning of that sort of cycle.
Okay, and so what was your position at Google? Talk to us a little bit about where you started, what you did while you were there, and just some of your experiences.
Yeah, it was phenomenal to be part of a pre-IPO company, and it's some of the fondest sort of memories for me. And that I got in there, and we came from a company that had no money to suddenly we went to a place where there's like 1,000 people. There was only 1,000 back then that were all like kind of like us, but really was encouraged to really take risks. And so we got there like endless resources, go take risks, go expand, do unpredictable things, and we're like, what the heck, like this is so crazy. And so it was just a lot of fun. So it felt like a true playground, and that's sort of one of the ethos of Google's culture is they firmly believe, besides the fact they're engineering driven, they're data driven, all these wonderful things, is that work and play can actually coexist happily. And they stayed very true to that. So when we were there, it didn't feel like work, honestly, the first several years. And truthfully, they allowed me to do whatever I wanted. And it was kind of one thing I was like, I want to work on enterprise search because I manage enterprise search at Applied Semantics. They're like, okay, you're on the enterprise search team. And then towards the end of my career there, we worked on Google Video, and this was before there was any sort of video or Periscope or all these things. And I had no experience in new media. I had no contacts in Hollywood, none of this stuff. And I was like, I kind of want to try this, and they're like, okay, go ahead and try it. So if you can find a company like that, it's quite dreamy because you get to do things that's much more for yourself. Certainly they did some matching, but really at the end of the day, they really thought that sort of your own drive and passion for whatever that space, whatever that customer segment would be, and where you felt you could learn most, and the team that you want, you just kind of went and did it. So I had an amazing time my final couple of years there to be at YouTube, and be part of that acquisition, and it was just really, really amazing.
So what did you learn going from Applied Semantics, a startup, where I'm sure there was tons of stress, to this like open culture, like an entrepreneur's playground?
Yeah.
Was that like, did it make you think differently about management and about hiring, or what were your big takeaways from that adjustment?
In some ways, it was an extension of our family at Applied Semantics. I think there were just more of them. So for me, it wasn't that so much shift from a personal interaction level. But I think what opened up for us was really, we knew in order for us to scale, we needed a partner, we needed resources, we needed distribution. And I think going there, we took AdSense from nothing. And let's be honest, AdSense is not all of our technology. The AdSense today is probably just a tiny bit of what we did back then. Google has added zillions of layers and many, many iterations. But we were able to go there and see, like, oh my God, now we have this massive distribution channel, and there's all these websites popping up, and we could actually put ads on all these things. Like, it was just kind of crazy to think about that suddenly we had all this. So it was sort of thinking about that everything was possible, and Google sort of helped me think that way. But funny, sort of the benefits I saw earlier, sort of the advantages or the joys even later on were the same reasons I decided to leave. So I think in 2007, 2008, I was at YouTube, I was leading marketing. YouTube was still a small team, super exciting, right? Like a team of 80. We were just building our channels on YouTube and all these wonderful things. But I just kind of thought to myself, for the last 5 years, I was sort of the Google girl. Like, I would get on the plane from LA, I had my little Google, bag, and people just knew me as the Google girl. And it was exciting, and it was easy. I had a brand. but then I realized that was soon all I was. And in 2008, I was at YouTube, sort of the height of my career there, and I got sort of it wasn't a one moment waking up thing, but it did hit me over a few months. I was like, this has become a bit comfortable, and it was really easy. I was making a good living, and I kind of thought, like, this is a little bit too easy, and who have I actually become? Am I only going to be Google for the rest of my life? And that's when I decided to take a leap, and I left, and people thought I was crazy to leave, but all those sort of instinctual things have turned out okay.
So what did you do next?
I started a company called Navigating Cancer, and I think I felt so lucky that I had a chance to, like, be part of a company sale to this amazing company, all this stuff. And so when I came out of Google, I had a lot of friends who wanted help with starting their own thing because somehow they thought I had some knowledge or whatever. And they're like, oh, Eva, can you help me with, this business plan, or I have this nonprofit? And I was like, man, I really need to do this. I really need to support my friends in some of their endeavors. And one of my friends was actually an older Jewish gentleman who was a physician who had a friend who had a child with a brain tumor. And it was like this convoluted thing, but the long short of it is they wanted my help in building a database for oncology to help people choose oncologists based on sort of the diseases, the type of cancer that they had. We got $50,000, and what turned in from Eva helped me with the business plan with this small amount of money to a full-fledged business like 6 months later, we ended up raising about $5 million. And I realized I knew very little about oncology, and so we found a CEO who knew more, and we moved it to Seattle, and now it's still doing super well. It's up there. That was sort of my first foray out.
Your first, like,
Yes.
all in?
Yes.
So how would you compare that to previous experiences? Like, you made the leap from Google and from YouTube.
Yeah.
Were you confident, like, after you had started Navigating Cancer, that you made the right decision?
Yeah, I was, because I realized that in doing that, the common thread, and again, this was not something I really thought about so much, but after Navigating Cancer, it was during Navigating Cancer, I really thought about data. And then it kind of circled back as I met up with Gil again, who was the co-founder of Applied Semantics, and I was like, Gil, I really need all this oncology data. And he was like, okay, it doesn't exist. And then we started talking, and our common passion sort of aligned, where we felt that there was an even bigger problem than Navigating Cancer was solving, which is there's all these big world problems that could be solved by data. And this is, remember, pre-big data hype, pre-big data moniker. This is early, big data was not even really talked about in that way. But we saw that if we can enable a bunch of Navigating Cancers by opening access to lots of interesting data for developers to build on. And that was sort of our mission. So I joined Gil, and we started building Factual, and it's now 100% strong. And one of my teammates, Matt, is here. So I'm really proud of what Factual has done. I think doing that, moving over to do that, we also recognize the complexity of working with data, and that while we try to boil the ocean at the beginning, which is build data sets for everything, right? Build data sets to power education and to solve poverty, all this stuff, very hard. It ended up we focused on location data, which has immense applicability, but we also realized, we had to narrow. Now Factual is one of the most, preeminent sort of location databases in the world.
So how long did that take from a conversation with Gil to actually founding the company?
Gil had the company going already.
Oh, okay.
It was called Structured Commons. It was a team of 10 scientists. And he had asked me to come in to advise him on the business side. And it turned from, and a lot of my life has been this way. I always, he was just come in to work for me. And if he's listening now, he paid me $50 an hour. He's like, why don't you help me with the logo and stuff like that. It's it was really helping a friend. And it's things like that where I jump in and I'm like, okay, I'll come in for a day a week. We'll work on logos and messaging.
Really, you're going to be there for the long haul. That's the trend I'm seeing.
Seriously. 6 years later, we were still together. So, if you count Google, Gil and I have worked together in some element for 14 years. Super honored to have all that time with him. If you don't know Gil, you guys should get to know him. He's a very prominent LA entrepreneur. He's pretty amazing. So.
So at this point in your career, had you been moving from opportunity to opportunity because of you or because of the people that you wanted to work with?
Yeah, another great question, Joe. I mean, I think always lead with people if you had the choice, but if you can find people and opportunity, then you hit the jackpot. For most people, it doesn't happen that way. It's either like they see something, they interview for a company, and it's like the opportunity's fun, they get it. You know, it might be an area of passion for them, like sports or whatever. And then they later on get in, and they learn that the leadership team isn't exactly what they thought, or the culture or the values are not really aligned. I think that's a harder thing to solve, and I think happiness will not come from that. The reverse is you go in with awesome people that you really like. The opportunity doesn't really work. It pivots, it changes. You go through hard times, yet you still stick it through. So, ideally you have both, but I always say lead with people, because if you look at the beginnings of Airbnb, Pinterest, none of those ideas were what they were. It took like years. I mean, I think Airbnb started off as like honestly a breakfast cereal company.
Wasn't Instagram like location based?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, Airbnb couldn't raise money, so they were going around with like cereal boxes, pitching it more like, well, nobody will give us money, but like our proposition is you could couch surf and then we'll serve you cereal. So they were carrying, like the founders were carrying actually cereal boxes around. So it's interesting, right? So, and Pinterest was nothing of what they were doing today. It took them like 5 years. So that's I was leading with founders as a safer bet, or a team really.
So from Factual, talk to us about what's happening now. How did you make the leap to become a venture capitalist?
Yeah, I think post Google, I got asked by a couple of the larger VC firms to think about joining them, and probably for like a couple of months, I interviewed with them. I actually got some offers. I thought about it, but it was another sort of moment where I walked into these offices where there are usually 5, 7 male white partners. And again, it was more me than them, because I walked in and I was like, this doesn't fit me. And it wasn't lack of admiration or anything like that. It just didn't feel right for me. And so I didn't do it. So I didn't have my mind to do venture or finance. Like, I know very little about finance.
Says the 11-year-old at
I know, I really didn't. I got approached by a friend of mine, Seth, 2 years ago when I was still at Factual. He was like, well, Eva, like you're doing some fun things at Factual. Have you thought about joining and starting a fund? And it was at that time at Factual where I felt like I really loved the mission of Factual, but I also wanted to enable a lot of other folks to sort of do more things with data. So specifically in health and education, 2 areas I'm pretty passionate about. So Seth and I just started chatting, and that's sort of where I thought, like, for the next chapter of my life, where can I be most productive? Where can I be most useful? And really, I just kind of led with that. Is like, life goes so fast, and we have such limited time. And when I was at Factual and when I was advising, I never knew 6 years was going to go by in a blip, right? And I knew this was going to happen again. That if I just joined another thing, or it was just going to go, it would. And I kind of thought about, like, where can I apply my time and my efforts so that I can enable more people to do things, people who are smarter than I am. And that's when I thought about how to scale myself. And that's when it came to thinking doing a fund made sense. And so we started as a team of 4 and raised the fund. So.
And what year was that?
This was late 2013, but we closed the fund last year.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. And so what are you looking for? What industries specifically, not just you, but the fund in general? What's the size? What stage? Yeah,
we're a $25 million fund. And we focus on data-centric companies. And the way to think about it is, if you look at sort of the data stack, we're not focused on the lower data infrastructure, so we don't do stuff like data warehousing, Hadoop, things like that. But it's really much more at the analytics, business intelligence, application layer, and more on enterprise versus consumer. So if you look at the enterprise, all the functional areas in enterprises need applications that are easy to use as Yelp. And we don't have it. So whether it's HR, operations, the financial department, auditing, all that stuff, a lot of it is still very old school tech and or paper. So we focus a lot on sort of solving some of those problems. Our check sizes are 350 to 500, and we're a seed investor, so as early as possible. Many are pre-revenue. Some are just like simple ideas. Others are a bit more fleshed out.
And how much have you changed since you started? Have you had to pivot at all or make adjustments?
Yeah, it's like I'm new at this, and it's a lot of learning. I think I took for granted how hard it is to actually run a fund and actually do well at it, right? I think there's a thing of like running a fund and using other people's money to like help entrepreneurs. It feels good, right? Like it feels like everyone would want to do that, but ultimately the responsibility is to drive a return, and that takes a lot of discipline, a lot of experience, and in VC, and this is what you see is there's a lot of apprenticeship type of thing. Like you have to learn from others and people who've done it for a long time. So I think I went in not recognizing how much there is to learn. So even over the last year, sort of how I think about how to deploy capital, how to choose entrepreneurs, things to look for has kind of changed a bit. And I think that's natural, and it will continue to change. So I think what I look for today may not be what I look for in 3 years. And now limited partners, or we call LPs, the people that give us money, expect that. Because not only will you change in your sort of pattern matching and thought processes, but also the market will change, the competition, all sorts of stuff will change around you, and you have to be quite adaptive. So.
How far ahead are you thinking when you're making investments? Are you thinking, is this company going to be around in 10 years, in 15 years? Are you more concerned with just who's in the room and their current vision?
I think every VC has a different perspective on this. There are many ways to drive a return for fund and how much return that you want. So there are folks that are only going for the 10x returns or unicorns. There are others that are going for 2x or 3x returns. I would like to say that as a small fund, we're pretty ambitious and we want to find the unicorns. I think every year there's 12 to 15 companies that are market-changing companies, and we want to be in as many of those as possible. So that's kind of how we think about it as a fund.
What type of role do you take, like actually with the company? You take a board seat? Are you very active in an advisory role?
Yeah. So we started with 4 partners, and our hypothesis at that time was that each of us brought, and they're amazing guys, brought complementary skills. Some are strong in customer acquisition, some are strong in technology, and that together we came as sort of a holistic group, and that we will provide sort of, in some ways, and I don't know if you guys know, Andreessen Horowitz has a very much service-based model. They have a team of 100, and even marketing alone, I think they have like 8, 10 people, and that's their advantage of going with Andreessen. Andreessen funded our company Factual, and so I learned a lot from them. It's like, wow, like they really stood up. Like all my interactions with them were top-notch. If I called for help on anything, whether it's like it was helping Factual, like interview somebody or close a candidate or look at a spec, whatever, think about a logo, honestly, like they were there. And I took that and I was like, can we create that in a smaller version in the seed fund? And that's sort of what we had aimed to do, what we are aiming to do at Susa was to do that, was to bring operators on board that sort of done it before and provide those skill sets back to entrepreneurs. And often it is pretty hands-on, but at the same time, having been on the operating side, there are a lot of startups that don't need our help as much for a variety of reasons. Either there's other investors around the table that may be better at that, at that industry or whatever. So we don't force ourselves into it. It's kind of, if they need us, we want to be there.
Are there any companies that you can talk to us about or case studies?
Yeah, I mean, we have 25 companies in our portfolio. I think what's shifted a bit is we're starting to lead a few more deals, and it's a different mindset because to lead a deal, what it means is you come in, you meet an entrepreneur, you're early on, and you have super strong conviction that it can work. It's a big responsibility to take on, and I think seed funds, and including funds like Carlin TX up there, he leads a lot of deals. It's a very sort of courageous move for a seed fund to say, I'm going to try to do this, especially as a young seed fund, and then you have to go convince all these big guys like Google Ventures, like come, believe in what we see. But it's the way to go. Like if you want to really be a top fund, you have to lead some deals. So recently we led a deal called Scalar. It's a holistic log server very nerdy management system. It's kind of like a Splunk, but it's in the cloud. It's easier, whatnot. But the founder was the founder of Writely, which Google had bought and turned into Google Docs. And so Steve Newman, amazing guy who's a staff engineer. So we led that deal, and it was just announced a couple weeks ago. So pretty proud of that one. and we got Google Ventures and Bloomberg involved for that one. So that's that's one. I mean, we have many. I can't say any of them are sort of super favorites or anything, but a lot of really interesting data plays in finance. We do a lot of finance, education, health, things like that.
Do you think that unicorns are always polarizing ideas?
They can be, right? I mean, I think if you look at sort of the big unicorns for the last, 5-10 years, they were definitely not the obvious ones. Like maybe things like Instacart was probably a little easier to see because the on-demand economy is already moving. But even then, Instacart, like early on, had a lot of trouble. Like I don't think people saw what they could actually do. I think most of these sort of courageous ideas are, I think if it's a common idea, it's kind of a Me Too thing, then you're going to get a lot of competition, and it's going to be a sort of a duking out. And those, it's really hard to, because it's sort of, they fight on price or whatnot, and it's sort of a race to the bottom. When you're just doing like, I'm doing that, but I'm just doing a little better. Those are hard to be unicorns. It's usually sort of people that are super orthogonal to what, yet they foresaw a movement or a trend or a theme, and they like latched onto it, and they saw it before anyone else. So for the regular person, it might be like, that sounds a little nutty. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about just your future and what you think is going to happen in the next 20 years and what your goals are, and then we'll open up for Q&A for all of you to ask Eva your questions. So where do you want to be in 20 years?
That's a terrible question. Who knows, right? Like, does anybody? Do you know?
I don't know.
You're
I'm asking you. It's a lot of people like have this interview question of like, what do you see yourself doing in 5 years? I hate that interview question. And I love you, but that's why I
that's
asked
a terrible
20.
question.
It's 4 times better.
Four times better. I don't know. Is the honest answer. I think. If I fall back to it, I'm hoping I could look back at my life and felt like I lived it with some purpose, and that I got a chance to serve. And whether that's in the capacity of investor, advisor, operator, I don't know. I'm enjoying being a VC now. I don't know what I'll be enjoying in 5 years, and I hope my LPs are not listening, because I think a lot of people they get into these things and they think they're going to do it forever. But I'm pretty opportunistic, not from optimizing wealth, but optimizing value creation. So I hope 20 years from now I can look back and that I still had the sort of ethos of being able to take risks, being courageous, and being around top-notch people and sort of doing right by those people is sort of the only sort of the principles that hopefully will continue to guide me.
Now, flipping that question. If you could talk to yourself 20 years ago, what would you tell yourself?
I would say the one thing I didn't do a lot when I was younger was be happy. And I think it's probably one piece of advice is be conscious to decide to be happy. Because I think it's a decision. And that happiness has nothing to do with externalities. When I was younger, I felt like my own victim, right? It's kind of like, oh, I couldn't do this because my family had no money. Well, that's an excuse, right? Because you could still be happy. So I think I spent a lot of my early years kind of feeling like the world was on top of me. And I think as I got older, I kind of flipped that sort of on its head and realized that all those disadvantages have become my advantages. And so that when I talk to young people, it's like, just try to enjoy it and have fun with it. And it's easier said than done. So.
We've talked about, and I've heard you speak about this before, just the concept of scaling yourself. And I feel like you have that vision, and you've had that vision. I'm sure it's developed over time. But what advice would you give to everyone here and everyone watching at home about the importance of scaling yourself and what that means?
I think I said that a couple of weeks ago when people were asking why I wanted to be a VC. But I think it's actually applicable to life. Is the one quality I look for when I look for an entrepreneur. I mean, there are several things I look for when I'm thinking about should I invest in this person or this group of people. But one thing I do look for is a natural ability to empower others. And I think it's not so much an overt leadership skill, right? I think there are folks who are born that just great speakers, they have charisma, they have magnetism, and that's great. That's awesome. I think they have a leg up. A lot of people don't have that, right? And I didn't have that. But you still have to have this sort of innate sense of believing and having conviction in something, and that you can gather other people to believe in that too. And I think that's a really important attribute and something I actually really look for. And it could be somebody who's actually kind of quiet, but somehow it's something about them, right, and what they're trying to achieve that people are like, I want to rally behind this person. And I think that for me is scaling yourself, is surrounding yourself with top people, the best people. And as a CEO, honestly, you had to do one thing well, is the ability to recruit today, right? It's harder than ever. Everything else can fall on the wayside. But if you can surround yourself, like if you're weak in tech, find yourself a good technical co-founder. If you're weak in market, whatever, those can be filled, but they have to want to join you.
Let's take some questions.
Yeah, incubators. Do you find teams of talent there, or do you recommend any?
Yeah, it's a good question. There are lots of incubators. They're not all created equal. There's some. So I advise, it really is sort of what you're looking for, and you have to match sort of your needs to what they offer. So they vary in the type of mentorship, the equity that they take, where they need you to be, how long they last, their outcomes. So if you're like driven by, do these people that go through the incubators come out achieving certain things that you value? So it's not always like, oh, they raise the most money. That's not the only metric, right? A lot of the other incubators offer other value, which is perhaps, if you're at a certain stage and you really needed somebody to help you refine, say, product market fit, and it's not about raising money, or you needed somebody that was really deep in X, Y, Z. So decide what you really need and find an incubator that matches you. I mean, locally here we have amazing ones, like MuckerLab is one that I really like, Amplify. So, there's lots of stuff locally, but there's stuff up north and around the country.
Out of the 25 investments, how many are based in LA?
Right now, only one is Whisper. Personally, I've invested in a few others like Tradesy, Lauren Wolf, thanks to TX for that one. So I've done a couple others on sort of my part, but most of them are up north. And the only reason really is we do a lot of enterprise SaaS, which is heavy data, and a lot of those skills are up there. But I think that's changing rapidly as those skills move down here.
I have a question about technical talent in LA versus the Valley.
Yep.
So, you guys made the big decision to invest in LA. Do you think that we can compete with the talent that's up there? Do you think it's an advantage to have a technology company in Los Angeles?
Today, I could say yes with confidence. I think people, if you look at sort of LA today, we have some amazing anchor companies, and we're going to have amazing billion-dollar exits, right? Like, we have SpaceX, we have Snapchat, we have Maker Studios. We have lots of companies out here. Oculus came up. So it's no longer like we're this kind of like sibling of the North. And I think there's just a lot of advantages out here, not just a technical talent, but there's just a lot of, we have a lot of natural advantages that from being, like whether it's the entertainment connections, whatever it is. And you'll see that a lot of people are moving down here. Like Amazon now is the presence here. We have a lot of companies out here. And I think it's all those people that come down here and a year later decide to leave Amazon and, join your startup. That's what's going to, and it's happening fast. So it's an incredible time to be an entrepreneur in LA, I think.
Okay. And thank you first for coming here to speak with us. Very
Thanks for being here.
inspirational. My question is relating, how can we choose when we have multiple ideas and we want to bring down to refinement and make it a diamond instead of covering everything and try to make all the potential customer happy? What are some of the metrics that you should look for to evaluate your ideas?
Yeah.
And the step, maybe give us like a small breakdown.
Yeah. So if it's sort of, you built like one technology and you think that there's like lots of application areas, I guess the question is whether you're talking about that or whether you literally have very disparate ideas. Are your ideas very disparate, or are they all have connected, but sort of you're deciding like what market to go after?
Yes, one idea,
Okay.
but then there are multiple usage and multiple market entry possible, serving different purposes to connect. How do you choose to focus on what should you dive first?
Well, that's a good problem to have. That your application is actually that broadly applicable because a lot of stuff is actually very narrow. So my simple advice is you can now do customer testing with very little money. I expect my founders to be able to show some sort of customer research development progress with like $50,000. Like you should be able to find something. I mean, it might not be that you found perfect product market fit, but you should be able to do surveys with like a bunch of people. You should be able to push out like a prototype. So I would narrow those down to like a few, and then just have yourself sort of a timeline and amount of money that you want to spend, and have a little plan of like, I'm going to test these things, and these are the metrics I would look for me to say I will move forward with this particular idea. But you have to have a good idea of what the metrics should be, and I think that's part of the hardship is like as a young entrepreneur, you don't know what that is, and honestly, for enterprise SaaS is very different from consumer, right? So the metrics that you're looking for. So we could talk more offline, but depending on which area you're going after, there are some metrics that will tell you like, I think I've got something here. Does that make sense?
Thanks for sharing your story.
Thanks for being
Was
here.
there a conscious point in your life or a professional milestone that you associate when you decide to be happy? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's taken me a while, but I think it's so much of it is just feeling you fit in wherever it is and that you belong around the table. And there's a moment in life that happens and you're like, oh, I sat here, nothing happened to me. Like, you sat around the table and the world didn't come crashing down on you and nobody said mean things to you. Like, there's a moment where you yourself just kind of come into your own. I think it happened in my early 30s where I felt that, now like I could go talk to anybody, and not that I'm always like the bravest person, but at least I feel like I deserve the conversation and I deserve the attention, and that's okay. And that just takes time, I think. It takes time for yourself, and again, people hit it at different points in their life.
Any more questions up there?
Quick question to go back to the north-south thing and shuttling back and forth in your world. First off, thanks for coming here and telling your story. There was a report last year, an economic report in October, that stated there were 365,000 tech jobs in LA, and we're some of any city in the country now. How do you see the coalescence of the creativity of Hollywood now coming in and merging, where you have celebrity coming involved as well, mostly behind the scenes in a lot of ways, them bringing funds to the forefront? How do you see that coalescence coming together and that impact and power coming together in a way that Silicon Valley doesn't speak that language, doesn't really know how to bridge that gap between Hollywood creativity and what's happening here for us?
I think it's already happening. So I think Hollywood recognizes they've been sort of behind the 8 ball, and a lot of them missed sort of the online video trend, honestly, and are suffering right now because they have warehouses full of DVDs. So I think it's already happening, and I think people appreciate. So I think what's changed now versus 5 years ago is that people in the Valley actually appreciate Hollywood, right? They don't no longer feel these are different creatures, and when they come down here, they don't, we can't merge. I think a lot of the VC funds up north have consciously invested in being down here and learning about our ecosystem and playing with it. So it's a big step forward. So like having people like David Lee be down here, Kleiner Perkins is now doing like monthly events down here. It's a big change. And as they are down here more, they're like, wow, there's a lot of cool stuff down here. They're starting to make investments. And you'll see a lot of these firms that never played in LA before are now setting up either presence or investing, which is huge change.
What advice would you give to a unicorn?
Are you a unicorn?
Yes, ma'am.
I love it. Advice. Well, I think I want to be you. No, I'm joking. I don't know how to answer that question. I'm not exactly sure what you're specifically asking.
I want to stay in the game, and I don't want my head cut off. And it seems like after 27 months, you go after the founder.
You go after the founder?
The founder seems to get let go in the equation.
Oh, are you a CEO?
Yes.
Okay. That's a fair concern. I think again, I don't have a simple answer for that. But hopefully, you're doing your job and serving your company well. I think if you continue to do that, you should be okay. But there is also a time where you may decide that it's no longer right for you. And if you do decide to make that break, whether you make it or they make it, you sort of have to take the higher road, which is perhaps you're not the right person to run the company. Yet it's okay because it's going to go into somebody else's hands and you still have equity and you're going to move forward. So a lot of founders hit that point like year 3 to 5. I think the percentage is pretty high where the original founders either no longer CEOs or get pushed out is a negative word, but move on. And that's pretty natural for a cycle of a company. But if you continue adding value, I hope you get to stay.
Thank you.
Sure.
We'll take 2 more questions.
Back there?
When you guys are looking at an investment that's pre-revenue, what are you kind of looking for in the founders to provide for strategies or documentation to monetize later down the road? Like how much business are you putting on that?
Yeah, I think for pre-revenue companies, I look for 2 things specifically. It's all on the strength of the team, and B is your conviction in the market. So it's sort of, you have to come to the table with some vision for where you think the market is going and some data, and the data is going to be completely wrong because you're going to take a guess at it, but directionally where you see it going. And that's all, for pre-revenue, that's all you can do. I mean, if I said more stuff, like you won't be able to, I mean, it would be pie in the sky to
Do
me.
you want me to say like, oh, if we take 1% of a $163 billion market, I mean, from what I've heard, that's kind of like a ridiculous thing to say, and it's something that we hear all the time. Is it more the actual strategy for how you're going to take just a piece in general and not how big that pie actually is?
I think it's okay to say what category you fall into. I think some folks just pick like a really, really big pie, and then they're like, well, I'm going to take 10% of online advertising, and they don't justify. So as long as you can kind of walk us through from a bottoms-up analysis, like I'm going to get 1% of this, $10 billion pie, and this 1% is going to represent X dollars because there's X number of businesses who will pay X to use it. If you could kind of work upwards from some sort of bottoms-up analysis, it's stronger. It's not absolutely necessary, but it's stronger. I think the common mistake is people do tops down, which is I have a big pie and I'm just going to take the slice and you should give me money because I'm going to take they'll say even 1% is huge, but like work backwards from that 1%. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does.
Sure. One more? Okay.
So thank you for sharing your past with us. It was really inspiring. You make success sound so easy. So I come from Mexico, an IT company based in Colima, and although the tech scene is vibrant over there, if we're wondering how like the gap between LA and San Francisco is, I wonder how you see like the gap between Mexican startups and American startups, and what's your prognosis about Latin American startups in the next few years?
A great question that I'm not highly knowledgeable on, so I'll admit that. I'm not an expert in the South American markets. What I've observed, though, is there are folks that are focused on those markets, like Dave McClure from 500 Startups is a great person to follow because his team is large. They have money, and he's actually very much invested in Mexico City, as well as, I think, Brazil and some other places. So there are specific funds that have more of an international focus. I remain optimistic, but I'm not on the ground. I'm not feeling the pain that you may feel like there's no network here or whatever. So I don't really know. I haven't been to Mexico City. But the fact that you're here, people like you can serve as a bridge, which is like take the knowledge from here. And it's not only Mexico, right? You look at cities like Memphis, which I just came back from. They feel a lot of pain because even though they're part of the U.S., they might well be in another country, honestly. So all those questions, all these sort of budding little ecosystems, they're asking like, how do we accelerate? How do we take all the learnings from the markets that have worked, and how do we do it faster and better? And there's a lot to be learned. So I think hopefully people like you can be ambassadors and make friends around here that can help you go back, who care about Mexico, and help you go back and grow that ecosystem.
Let's give a big hand for you. So I think I speak for everyone here that it really has been a privilege to listen to your story.
Thank you so much.
Just starting at the beginning and seeing where you are now. Like I'm sure all of us can't help but think where you're going to be in the future, and that we can hope to watch and see all the amazing things that you're going to do. not only for your fund and the startup they're lucky enough to work with you, but also for LA. So really, it means so much that you would come here. Your story is incredible, and I really think that a lot of people learned an amazing amount and have a lot of work to do now, right? Am I right? Yeah. So a couple notes before we conclude and before we have a final 45 minutes or so of networking. The next event we're having is May 14th with Monica Doty. After that, we're going to be hosting the Swag Bucks founders in June. And then in July, we are hosting Gary Vaynerchuk. So we have some great events coming up. We can only hope that they're going to be as amazing as this one was. And we hope to see you all there. So please feel free to find myself, Sandra, Max is here, AJ. Those are our volunteers. Also, Naomi, if you can just wave for everyone. Naomi is the Orange County chapter director. So if you ever find yourself in Orange County, or if you just love events like this, you definitely need to go down and attend one of her events. She does an amazing job. She has great speakers. And then lastly, I just want to thank all our sponsors, General Assembly, SHIP, Creative Collisions for the filming, and everyone that attended. So thank you so much. Give yourself a big round of applause.